Welcome to Game Talk Radio. Your hosts, Greg and Jen, bringing you their take on this week's hottest gaming news.
Welcome back, everybody, to Game Talk Radio. I'm Greg.
I'm Jen.
And this is episode 17.
17.
So, I'd say probably half the podcast today we're going to talk about the Switch. So if you don't care, I guess you can stop listening now.
Whoa.
But that's the back half.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear the Switch stuff, you can fast forward. Or you can just listen to the whole thing and shut up about it.
Whoa.
And not complain. How about that?
Don't tell our listeners what to do.
Well, I'm going to tell them. Buckle in for this one. So that's going to be like the main story, the back half or whatever. We'll be doing that. But in the beginning, we did have a couple stories we want to touch upon. The first being that this week, or last week, I suppose, Microsoft announced that there's going to be something called the Xbox Game Pass.
Which, when you explained it to me, is a lot like Netflix streaming, but with video games. And my first thought was, well, don't we already have GameFly? But that's just physical games, right?
So GameFly was kind of like Netflix before they went to pretty much the all-digital platform that they have now. So GameFly, you still send them, you pay them money every month, and you get a game, you send it back, you get another game. It's like a game rental service.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very similar to PlayStation Now, which is the same sort of streaming service that Microsoft's offering up is something that Sony did a couple years ago. Sony, though, it charges $14 a month, and that's only if you buy it multiple months out. Normally, it's $20 a month, I think, just month to month. Microsoft is coming in at $9.99 a month to stream what they say is over 100 Xbox 360 and Xbox One games.
So what are the benefits of doing this stream-wise rather than just buying a game outright? It's probably cheaper?
Well, I think subscription model is just another way to get people to play your games.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice game sales are going down, it's almost like Netflix. Like they're able to do a lot of original content now because they have so many people buying subscriptions from them. So I think it's kind of the same thing. Like Microsoft sees that essentially the future may not be digital downloads of games. It may be digital streaming of games.
Oh.
So they might be thinking just what the future lies. Because for the longest time, they've been trying to get us to switch to digital. There's a lot of problems with that. Really large game sizes take a long time to download.
So you need way more space.
So you need way more space on your hard drive. And then it takes a long time to download. Now, they've kind of battled that a little bit by having things like preloading. So you can preload your games so that they're able to be played the night they come out. Like you could start downloading it a couple days before, but that's another headache. And then if you don't preload, basically the game comes out at midnight, you get to start downloading it, and it takes sometimes up to 8 hours if you have pretty good internet to download. And then you have to update it and all this other nonsense. Right. So the streaming, it could just be another way of doing games in the future, especially indie games. I could really see that. As opposed to having to download everything physically, but it is what it is. So it's just interesting that Microsoft kind of out of nowhere came out with this plan, and Sony's been doing it for a while, but not very successfully. So the PlayStation Now service only lets you stream PlayStation 3 games.
Oh.
And I think a couple of PS2 games, but mostly PS3. So what always bothered me about PlayStation Now was, why didn't they offer their entire Sony library? Like, you should be PS1, PS2, and PS3.
Right, they've got such a great library of games. PS2 is a perfect example. I think the majority of the video games that I own are PlayStation 2.
Right, and it makes sense to me, just like Netflix does. Okay, so you want to get those best Square Enix RPGs, then you pay Square a percentage of whatever those games are played, and then you get the rights to them. The more good games you have, the more people are going to buy your service. So it's very like the PlayStation Now system is just like Netflix, except they're not doing it as well. And so it's, I
don't know. I have probably mentioned this before, but I'm much on the side of I like having a physical copy of the game.
Which I still do as well.
I mean, Netflix is great, and I love Netflix for watching television shows or movies and everything. But for me, video games are not meant to be like an all-you-can-eat buffet. With the increase in video games available to me at any one time decreases my ability to play one, because
interesting. Okay,
it's almost like if I don't like the game, I'll switch it out and then I'll play a different game. So I'm in this constant state of like learning how to play the video game. I get frustrated, so I give up. Whereas if I actually have bought the game new or used and I only have that game to play, it almost forces me to see it through and not get frustrated and just throw it across the room.
That's a cool take. Actually, that makes a lot of sense because I say the same thing about emulators.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I have like on my PSP, which I've got hacked so that I can take like my PS1 and my NES games on like an airplane or something portably.
We don't condone that.
No. I mean, I own all the games I play on there. I mean, you know,
I'm
but
just
I
kidding.
agree. I'm not like
Continue.
obviously
Sorry.
owning a used game store. I'm not a fan of piracy. You know, we like people to buy stuff, but I do it for that reason. But there are times when, say, you've got a choice of 200 games, you might only play a game for 5 minutes. As soon as it frustrates you,
Right.
there's a different game I can play. But if you only have 1 or 2 games to play, you're gonna power through that. Kind of like when we were kids. I don't know if you ever did a lot of game renting when you were younger, but like I know
No,
we didn't.
really didn't.
We didn't have a lot of money, so we only really rented games. And we would go to the grocery store, and we could rent a game for the weekend. It was like $2, and we could rent a game for the weekend. And if you rented a stinker, you played it the whole weekend because it was the only
Right.
game you had, and you found some joy and some fun in it. So it's definitely
I don't know, like, but for us,
it's almost overstimulation.
well, I think we kind of had a similar experience, but ours was on the opposite end because we had a game, but that was the only game we had. Like, my brother only had probably, if I had to guess, 15 titles on his Nintendo. And when we got a Super Nintendo, we only had 5 games. And it was just because we really didn't have any interest or there wasn't, a used video game store or anything like that. And from my dad's perspective, renting a game was a waste of money because you didn't get to keep it.
Huh, interesting.
So we had
thought
kind of
process.
an opposite sort of effect. I'm not saying that we didn't rent games. For some reason, I have in my memory, like we had in the past rented games, but it wasn't enough for me to remember several times of doing it. But going back to the podcast that we did, I think it was last week, we talked about Peter Kuselchek,
Mhm.
the one who played through all of the Nintendo Entertainment System games. I mean, just imagine the amount of dedication of getting through it. And I'm sure that when he was in hour 80 of that piano playing program, he wanted to throw in the towel, but it was the goal of playing through all the games. So, I mean, if that's your goal to play through all the games, sure, then a subscription service would be a lot cheaper than actually buying the games outright. But if you're like me, I don't play a wide variety of games. I kind of stick to very similar games. And I don't play a lot. I don't play a lot of in terms of quantity. I much prefer quality over quantity.
That's an interesting take because I also think about sometimes when you feel like just watching something new on Netflix. Like we've obviously got our shows we watch. We always default to like Scrubs or The Office, like for just something quick and fun to watch.
Yeah.
And then obviously we're on Hulu. We're watching Twin Peaks right now.
Or if you're me, I'm watching Golden Girls.
We're watching Golden Girls, but like we've got some that you always go back to. But sometimes I feel like I want to watch something new. Like every year around Halloween, I always want to watch a scary movie, right?
Right.
Like you and me watch, and then I sit there and I look for, I don't know, an hour.
Because there's just so
many to choose
from. And what do we watch? Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah, and then we end up watching what we've already watched before, but we know is good. But then you end up kind of settling, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely with you on that. That makes a lot of sense. So that might be a bad thing. And also, people play games differently. Like there was a long time when I was playing World of Warcraft very hardcore. Like I wasn't playing other games besides that, or if I did, I was playing them very casually. So back then, it would have been really neat for me to be able to hook it up and go, "Oh, I played this game for 10 minutes to a half hour. It was cool. Now I know about it. I can tell people about it, but I have no interest in finishing it." Now, though, I've gotten more on I want to finish every game I play kick, which is why I'm going crazy right now because I was playing Neo, had to stop playing Neo to play Horizon, and I'm probably going to stop playing Horizon to play Zelda.
Because you watched me play 10 minutes of it, and it's so beautiful.
And it looks just amazing, so I want to play that. And I do believe, though, that Horizon's going to be better than Zelda, so I want to play Zelda first. So that I don't...
it.
Oh, come on. It's not...
Quit.
Oh, stop. I mean, it's Legend of Zelda. I want to enjoy it, and I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Like, it looks great already. I just... Like, Horizon just has equal parts Mass Effect, Metal Gear Solid, and
cultural misappropriation.
Which we will get into in a minute. But yeah, so I like the idea of a streaming service because look at how
Right.
TV was completely revolutionized by
Yeah,
Netflix.
I mean it's very. I think it is a niche market, a niche market rather.
Mm-hmm.
It's going after a certain demographic of people. I almost said demographic. That is not what I
That's
meant. A demographic of people who want to play 10 minutes of a bunch of games to find the one that kind of sticks.
mm-hmm.
And then if you take the subscription cost and multiply that by a year, if it's $10 a month, what is that, $120 a year? That's about the price of maybe
It's the
three
price
or
of
four
2 retail games, $60 a
brand
pop.
new.
Yep.
And if you feel like you can get your money's worth out of that, then more power to you. But for me, it's
It's kind
just
of
not for me.
part of the reason Sony did it, I think, was because it was their answer to backwards compatibility or their lack thereof. Because the PS4 doesn't play PS3 games.
But that first generation PlayStation 3 didn't it? And then it had all those overheating issues.
First gen PS3s played PS2 and PS1 games.
Yes.
All PS3s play PS1 games, which a lot of people don't know.
I didn't know that.
All PlayStation 3s will play PlayStation 1 games.
What?
Yeah, it's I know, it's crazy. But it's funny because basically the PS1 emulation on the PS3, it was software emulation.
Oh.
So when the PS3 first came out, it was really expensive and it wasn't selling well. So they started looking at things to cut out to drop the price down. So they started taking out backwards compatibility and they took out a couple other things. They get the price down. But PS1, that was just software emulation. So that didn't cost them anything to leave in. So they just left it in, and they left it in as part of a software thing. So a lot of people didn't realize that, but even the slim PS3s, the super slims with the sliding doors, they all play PS1 games still.
Here's a funny anecdote about how I know about the backwards compatibility of the first generation PlayStation 3. Because a friend of mine, his name is Josh, he joined the military, and he was stationed, I believe, somewhere in the Middle East, probably Iraq, I think. But when he left, he put a bunch of his stuff in a storage unit, but he asked me, hey, I'm fine with leaving my furniture and my books and all this in my storage unit, but could you hang on to my technology? Because I don't want that to get A, water damaged, B, stolen, or C, just something to happen to it.
Makes sense.
So I got very, very used to having a PlayStation 3 that was backwards compatible because he was the kind of guy that needed to buy it day one.
Sure.
And I got very, very used to it. And so when he came back from being stationed abroad, went out to buy a PlayStation 3 and realized, oh, they're not all backwards compatible.
Oh, okay.
So I was very frustrated by that. And since then, I've been very, not anti-PlayStation, but just anti, why can't you just make it backwards compatible? Because to me, I would gladly pay an additional cost to have an extra feature or make it something where you can buy it, it's external or whatever it might be, so that you can play it all in one. Because I don't like having to drag out my PlayStation 2, hook it all up, and then play PlayStation 2 games.
And the way Xbox One does backwards compatibility is you put the disc in, it reads the disc, and then downloads that game from the store, and you technically play a download.
Oh.
So it's a little strange, but it works.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on PlayStation 3, they had some PS2 games you could buy in the store. So it's like, well, if I can buy it in the store, why couldn't I do the same thing? Put the disc in, you say, hey, you already own this game, so we're going to let you download it and play it that way.
That's the thing. It's like I already own it. I already own a PlayStation 2. I already own PlayStation 2 games. Please just let me play it on my PlayStation 4.
And I agree with you not wanting to hook up a PS2, but when people come in looking for backwards compatible PS3s, they're old now and they're all starting to break. They're the original model. I'm just telling people, just buy a PS2 and be happier. The PS2 is going to last way longer.
I do love my PS2.
The PS2 Slim is great. It's a really solid system. It's great.
Like I said, I have more games. I think the only one I have that is even close to the amount of PlayStation 2 games I have is my GameCube, which is also one of those where it's like, you have a GameCube? I'm like, yes, I have a GameCube, and it's amazing.
And it's
so
awesome.
Shut your mouth.
GameCube's great.
I never owned a Wii. I owned a GameCube.
So as we were talking about, but anyway, yeah. So that's basically, just to sum it up. It's cool. It's like a Netflix type service.
Yeah.
I like where they're going. It'll maybe make companies step their game up when it comes to that sort of stuff, and maybe they'll make an improved service. They'll keep making it better. Maybe one day I don't think it'll ever replace gaming. It won't replace physical copies, but I could see it being a nice addition to that. Like, people who have Netflix typically still collect DVDs and Blu-rays.
Right.
It's just they like the service for convenience.
Well, and the other thing is just the fact that a lot of the time they'll put a movie on there and then they'll take it off because whatever. Like,
Right, they're rotating them in and out. Yeah.
I love the Great British Bake Off, and they had one season on there for months and months and months, and I watched it all the time because it's very soothing. If you've never watched it, it's a very soothing reality show. Because it's not really a reality show. It's a competition, but it's very British. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, well, they don't do the American stuff where
no, it's all like
it's
boom,
like
boom, boom.
last minute, all this like really flashy, like who's gonna win? Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, it's not like
just,
that at all.
Just show me the winners, please.
Super
Like,
chill.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be like a cliffhanger every commercial break and everything like that.
Right, and they took it off, and I was very sad. And just at the start of this month, they put not only the original season that was on there, but 2 additional seasons that I have not seen. So I'm very excited.
Excellent.
But here's where I'll leave the subscription service. And it also kind of explains, again, what kind of person I am. I have the Adobe Creative Suite. So that includes programs like Photoshop, InDesign, yada, 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 yada. And I bought it probably about 6 years ago. So it was Adobe Creative Suite 4. It was very expensive.
Yes.
And I was looking recently to see, where can I get like the most recent version of the Adobe Creative Suite? Because I was thinking maybe I want to buy a new version just to kind of upgrade my game. There's a lot of new functionality. If you look for tutorials on how to do certain things, it's really difficult now, or it's getting more difficult to find ones for the Creative Suite 4 programming because they want to keep those things up to date. Well, as it turns out, Adobe doesn't sell physical copies of their Creative Suite anymore. I have to buy a subscription, which is like $10 a month. Now, I do graphic design purely freelance, purely on the side. I cannot justify spending $120 every year for the Adobe Creative Suite when I don't use it that much. I use it when I need it, but it's not my full-time job. So, again, that's not for me. I would much rather have the physical copy of that program and then upgrade it as upgrades come out. And they don't give you that option anymore. It's really stupid.
I agree.
It's frustrating.
But even Adobe adopted a subscription model because they saw the benefit in that, like less per month. Even, I guess, technically that's how I run the computer system at the store. That's a subscription-based model. I pay $50 a month instead of upfront paying like the $5,000 for the computers and everything. I paid $50 a month. However, as we get to our 6-year anniversary, we've been paying $50 a month.
Right.
So we've been paying $600 a year. So now we're up to $3,600.
Right.
And that I've paid into them now more because I have a second register. So I'm technically paying $80 a month now. So it's like eventually I'm going to get to the point where I pay these guys $10,000 over 10 years as opposed to a one-time fee of like $3,000 or $4,000. So it's interesting. But again, when I was starting off, I could not afford that. I had to,
Well, and that's also the upfront cost. Buying a game outright from a Best Buy or a GameStop is a larger investment. If you don't like that game, you're kind of out of luck.
Well, and the subscriptions, even PlayStation Plus, or not PlayStation, PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live do it. Xbox Live is $60 a year, or it's, I want to say $40 for 3 months, or I think it's $15 a month, or however they break it down. So it ends up being $15 a month, which is a way horrible deal compared to
pretty pricey.
Or is it $10? Whatever it is, that might be $10 a month. But anyway, it breaks out. You pay way more if you do a less subscription. So they want you buying a year at a time, which makes sense, But that's kind of
Blizzard does the same thing.
Exactly. Yep.
So if I pay for 3 months, it's cheaper than paying just for 1 month, which is more, but it's more expensive than paying for an entire year up front. So it's all about where your means are. There's nothing wrong with going to your local used video game store and buying a video game that's used. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's nothing wrong with feeling like you want to spend $10 a month if you have the means to do it. But please, if you can't afford it, don't do it. That's really that's a good thing to think about for anything in life. I don't own any credit cards because for me, I was raised with the mentality of if you can't afford it, you probably shouldn't buy it. And I was never encouraged to get a credit card or anything like that, because it was, if you can't pay for it with cash, you don't need it, like, at all. Like, don't even try. Don't try to convince yourself that you need it, because you don't.
Right.
The only time I really got a loan, other than when I bought a house, was when I bought my car. That was the only time I'd ever had to take, and that was through the dealership.
Right. They just
So it wasn't really like a credit card. Anyway, so subscription service, it's $10 a month. If you feel like that's what you want to do, then go do it.
Cool.
It's not for me. Horizon Zero Dawn. You've played this.
This is what I'm currently playing.
You've claimed you've played it, but I have yet to see 1 minute of this video game.
Yeah, I've played it on my last couple days off, so I'm probably at about 6 hours in,
And
6 or 7 hours.
Was that?
Probably working.
Yeah. Not probably, definitely. I was at work, and so I have yet to see any of this supposedly amazing game that's like the greatest thing ever.
It is really good. It's like I was saying earlier, it's kind of a cross between, I used to say between Witcher 3 and Mass Effect.
Okay.
But then I started throwing in Metal Gear Solid, because now you'll get to an area where there's like 10 people and you can stealth kill them all.
Oh, neat.
So I can call them over and then I'll stealth kill them because you're standing in the tall grass, like, hidden.
Oh, sure.
And you have a sound meter, so if you run around, you make noise and it'll alert them. They have skill trees, and I've already given myself the skill where I can sprint at full speed and not be heard, which is great. So anyway, I'm playing this game. It's really good. I highly recommend it to everybody. I think it's actually going to be better than Legend of Zelda, like I was saying earlier, but we'll see. I'm probably going to stop playing this to play Zelda, because I do want to play Zelda, and I've got the itch to play just that game. But Horizon Zero Dawn is excellent so far. Like, I'm on track. It's an open world game, but it doesn't have all the same boring open world stuff. Like, there's side missions and stuff, but there's not as much of it that's more generic like a lot of open world games do. Like Assassin's Creed will have a million side missions that are all kind of stupid. This game, it tries to keep them condensed,
So where we're going to go with this is that there was a Polygon article that came out, March 3rd, which was Friday. And I want to read it, and I want to get your take on it, because having played the game, I haven't seen any of it, so I really have to take this article at face value. But they've received criticism, and when we say they, it's Guerrilla Games who makes it. They're actually based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. They received criticism for its portrayal of different tribes represented in the game, and 4 words used to describe those people: savages, braves, primal, and tribes. And a Native American writer called out that game, saying that it's reinforcing racist and colonialist ideas about indigenous people. What do you think about that?
I think I don't know. It makes no sense to me. Since how is tribal an offensive word? Like here, if anybody listening isn't from the area, like, that knows the area, like, Wisconsin is a huge
Oneida.
Native American population.
Well, actually, not even just Oneida. There's so many different.
So, like, on their identification cards, which we would sometimes take in for, like, doing tax exempt sales and stuff like that, it says right on there, it's like Oneida Tribe of Wisconsin. So they call themselves a tribe. I mean, unless I'm totally blasting this out and I'm wrong, and I do apologize if I am, but I'm pretty sure that that's totally acceptable vocabulary. Now, I understand savages. I totally get why you could consider that offensive, but in the game, it's another group calling that group that's more tribal, calling them savages.
Okay.
So it is meant to be a derogatory term. It's not like Guerrilla Games is saying, "Oh, hey, you want to play as these awesome savages?" No, it's they're not trying to highlight it. And let's see, what were the other 2 words? Sorry.
Braves and primal.
Okay, primal. I mean.
That's an adjective.
That's more describing stuff like, well, primal tribes. So, like, it's the idea of Horizon is that mankind's kind of devolved back into a tribal mentality because there was some sort of calamity on Earth that caused, like, a huge split and, like, a huge divide, and machines roam the Earth, like AI controlled machines essentially. And you're part of what looks like more of a Nordic tribe, actually. It's more Vikings than it is Native American.
Okay.
So you look at that, and I mean, I guess that could, like, primal is more trying just, I think, to describe almost like caveman, how they use furs for clothes and stuff like that. I mean,
well, bows and arrows and very primitive technologies. Outside of what you said about the AI kind of machines kind of roaming the earth, the human population has de-evolved
Right.
in a way where it's not what we know today as being society or culture or
Right.
anything. It's much
it's
more
more
like
primal than it is today.
well, and for those that don't know, I had heard the term cultural appropriation before, but I wasn't really sure what it meant. So before we logged on to do this, I looked it up on Wikipedia, which, despite it being on the internet and anybody can update it, it's still very useful information. Wikipedia is, I think, great because it's a whole, it's a free encyclopedia is really what it is. But a cultural appropriation is the adoption or use of the elements of one culture by members of another culture. But it's seen as harmful or controversial when the cultural property of a minority group is used by members of the dominant culture without the consent of the members of the originating culture.
So they're saying it's offensive if, say, someone of, I don't know, someone of, like, someone white like me
Mm-hmm.
would use these terms in a game and make a game about Native Americans and then use these terms. It's more offensive because they're technically a minority and I'm not. Which, I'm not saying that people wouldn't do this sort of thing in a way as to keep minorities down. That's absolutely things that happen. And they purposely belittle and use derogatory terms
Right.
and all that sort of stuff. I think what more upsets me about this story is that I guess I need more details. Did she actually play the game? Or did someone walk up to her and say, oh, well, there's this game came out and it basically calls Native Americans savages? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, did she play it? Or was she just told about it, or she read about the game and she saw the influence and then she watched a YouTube video and was like, here's another video game that's, not getting, my heritage correct.
Well, and I think this is the article that she wrote, which was on medium.com. But in all those thousands of words, those dozens of instances of that particular list, so tribal, primitive, brave, savage.
She's saying here she's more upset at the people who reviewed the game and who played a lot and didn't even mention this, is what she's saying here.
Right. Not a single review makes mention of the historical usage of those words or the tropes reflected in Horizon that caused the writers to use them without hesitancy. Now, is that a problem? Yes, it can be. However, without me having seen the game or played the game, I mean, us as a United States of America sort of culture, we have a horrible and horrific history of what we did to the Native American people when in the way that we tried to, break these savages, quote unquote, or overtake their land, rape and pillage their women, like all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it's horrific, and we
it's
don't.
Real. It happened.
It
real.
happened.
It's not made up. That happened.
And it's so downplayed when we talk about American culture or United States culture. It's so glossed over. You hear about the Trail of Tears, but it's like, oh, that was really sad. It's like, no, that was a horrible event that happened that apparently everybody was okay with, and all of that. The Wild West. It's like, well, what do you think we were trying to do? We were trying the United States Anglo-Saxon people were trying to overtake and essentially cause the extinction of an entire race of people.
They wanted to take over the entire area as theirs. They wanted to turn to their own country, and they wanted to get rid of the indigenous population. That's just what it was.
Right, because those early colonists, settlers, saw themselves as a more dignified, more intelligent, more whatever sort of culture.
Yeah, more. They were sophisticated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
which is hilarious when you look at people that the Americans that were going out west and that were shooting each other all the time.
right.
They were so much more civilized,
Now, with Guerrilla Games, I had mentioned earlier, they're from Amsterdam. That's in the Netherlands. I mean, the Netherlands does have a history of being a colonialist type of country with, I think it was called the Dutch Indo East Trading Company,
Okay.
something like that. They did do some colonialism in the West Indies, I think it was, or
Okay.
East Indies. Oh, hold on, I gotta look it up. But um, the Dutch East Indies, that's what it was called. So they do have some history. Now, I didn't do enough research to see like how they feel about, native cultures, or when they did the trading company, like what did they do to the locals.
Yeah.
But I can bet you that it wasn't as horrific as what the US settlers did to the Native American colonists. Where I'm going with this long-winded explanation is really that we the US American people probably have a little bit more guilt. I don't know how to say this in the right way without just me ham handing it. But the Dutch people don't necessarily come with all the baggage. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure.
And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to make light of what happened in the early days of the US, as far back as, the Mayflower and all of that. But I do think that there is a fine line between, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. But not having played the game, I really can't make a decision either way. But if this person played the game, or saw the game, or watched somebody play the game on YouTube and felt like she was being, as a Native American or an Indigenous American, felt it was putting her people in a bad light, I think she has every right to say that.
Well, and I think the point you were getting to during that explanation as well was that, like, it's not like this was a game made by Americans.
Right.
It was a game made by people in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the people that committed the atrocities made a game and then started using the terminology associated with those atrocities as a way to, as a negative term for them. I kind of feel like intent has to come in here somewhere too.
Mm-hmm.
They have to look at it and go, what was the intent of this game? Was it to knock the Native American culture? Was it to insult and belittle Native American people? No. It was a game that they made, and they took influences, absolutely, from many different tribes, whether African tribes, the Nordic stuff, or Native American tribes. Took a lot of inspiration from that, and they tried to build their own universe around that. So it's not like they did a historical recreation of what actually happened in the US, and then they tried to somehow downplay it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm looking at that. Yes, stereotypes absolutely exist.
Well,
I mean, that's
what I'm pointing at is that Overwatch had, I think her name is Farah, her Thunderbird and Rain Dancer skins. Now, that to me is cultural misappropriation. I mean, it is not, like, that to me, it goes back, like, when you see, like, these kids in these, like, 1950s TV shows, they're wearing, like, the full headdress, and they play cowboys and Indians and all that kind of stuff, and it makes you just kind of go, ugh. Like, that makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Cringe a little bit, yeah.
But from what you had said, you didn't feel that way when you were playing this game.
Not even a little bit.
Because
it wasn't cringy to me at all. It didn't feel inappropriate. Like, and I know I'm not Native American. I have no Native American history or ancestry. So it might be something that's more sensitive to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like I'm very good at detecting that sort of thing. And it didn't feel awkward to me. Like, I've talked about that before. Like, when I watched Overwatch's videos and they had the really badly done Japanese accents and stuff, and I was like, and like in Miss Pandaria where they've got like the fat pandas and they're like, these horrible Chinese accents, and I'm like, ugh, like that's just cringy as all hell. But I didn't get that at all in this game. They weren't doing it to like poke fun or to be like a hokey cartoon caricature of a Native American. I thought, I mean, I and I've never heard anybody, and being from this area, I have a lot of friends that are Native American. And a lot of them have played this game, and none of them have said anything about being offended by any of it. In fact, I would almost argue that they almost feel proud to be kind of represented in a game. Like, they have some, like, finally, like, there was a game that came out called Prey for the Xbox 360 a couple years ago, And that had like it started off, you're a Native American, that really has nothing to do with the story, but you're in like a bar and then you get abducted by aliens and you're running around, you know?
Oh,
So it really had an idea, but I know a lot of people who were like, it was just really cool to see me represented in a game. Like, you know, me as a Caucasian, I'm represented in like every game.
yeah.
So I don't have that feeling, but I know what it's like when there's a character who I can relate to.
Hmm.
And if you can relate to a character, obviously you'll have more attachment to it.
Well, it was a similar story. Like, Native American culture, especially in the United States, is not very well represented. And I think that that's a severe disadvantage because there's so much wonderful cultural things with Native American tribes. I mean, as we've mentioned before, there's a laundry list of Native American tribes that are within the Wisconsin state. I mean, just to name a couple of them, I mean, there's Potawatomi, Oneida, Ojibwe, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Iroquois. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just reading this right from a list, and there's so much beautiful history and so much beautiful culture. And there's a great museum that's, oh gosh, I can't even remember where it is, but it's out by like the airport and in the middle of nowhere, and it's like an Oneida historical museum.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful to see all the different artifacts and everything.
It's I guess to me, like, would they rather they lost that through time? Like, would you rather that video games stayed away from Native American culture and history?
Well,
Because what she seems to be really hung up on are these 4 words, which I've already debunked like 3 of the words as being just not having any issues. And then the 4th word, I totally agree that, like, if I walked up to my friend who was Native American, I said, "Hey man, you savage," like, he should get mad at that, and I would totally
right.
understand that.
Why would you do that?
But this game didn't try to highlight that terminology. It was almost like it was they were being called savages because they were, and it was meant to be a derogatory term in the game for the character that represents that culture. So it was part of the story. It wasn't just done just to like belittle. It's so
Well,
confusing to me what people get offended at everything now. Like, you know.
well, going back to like how the Native American people are kind of misrepresented, or not misrepresented, but just not very present in media. Uh, I'm not talking about like movies from like the 1950s, like we mentioned before, but uh, a today example is Suicide Squad, where they had the one Native American guy. Everybody was super excited. They really pimped out the fact that he was going to be in this movie. He gets he's the butt of a joke and then gets killed. Like within the
Yep.
first 2 minutes of him being in this movie. And then he's never seen again. And it's like,
Well,
what
yeah.
the heck was that?
Well, and we're watching Twin Peaks.
Oh God.
And so they've got one of
yes.
the deputies is Native American. What's his name? Is it
His last
Hawk?
name is Hawk. It's
So
like,
I mean,
come
so right
on.
away, it's just he just walks, was like Hawk, and he's got this yes, like I mean, it's again, you can as soon as you see that, you're like, ugh,
Because
like you cringe a little bit, you're like,
they
oh,
kind of
stereotypes.
give him a little bit of a mysticism sort of vibe where it's like he can,
Very stoic and silent.
yeah, and using his power with the earth and all this sort, like they have him discover things. It's like come on,
So-
really?
So then this happens, which honestly, if a game comes out and someone has a problem with it, and they want to talk about it, okay.
Please
I don't-
let us know.
Well, I mean, like her, like the lady who wrote this article.
Okay.
She wants to talk about it. Okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So then Guerrilla Games responds because they see this article that's getting some traction where they feel like that. So then they respond. So the response that they have, I'll be honest, I read this, it's a little chippy because you
Okay.
can tell that these guys worked really hard on this game
Mhm.
and they worked very hard not to offend anybody, and someone still somehow got offended. So I'm going to read his quote. Let's see here. This is the quote originally from the article with her. Okay, so this is what he said. This is the representative of Guerrilla Games. His name is John Gonzalez. He says, the vocabulary was certainly discussed during the creative process in terms of wanting to make sure we were sensitive to the cultural concerns of our audience. We weren't looking for inspiration from one particular group, and we cast the net widely to look at cultures, tribal cultures around the world, and also throughout history. That's why a lot of people talk about the Nora, that's the tribe that you're from in the game, as being like Vikings, or why there are visual elements reminiscent of Celtic pictographs. So inspiration came from a lot of different places. Talking about the term brave, With that in particular, our research into it was that it was not a term that would seem to be offensive. We were trying to find a term that would combine the capabilities of a warrior and the capabilities of a hunter. It was a term that we felt was not derogatory, as we came across some terms that were definitely slurs against Native Americans and other groups throughout history. And so our decision was based on brave not being a quote-unquote hot button term.
Right. I mean, they could have used some really horrible terminology and really horrible slurs. And, I get it, the Atlanta Braves, all that sort of controversy surrounding that terminology. The way that it's depicted is pretty derogatory. Their old logo was pretty derogatory.
Yeah.
But they felt, I mean, what I'm reading between the lines here is that they felt like they were actually raising that up and having it be of almost a not complimentary, but
like paying respect to it.
More
well,
like, yeah.
And so this is the part that I felt like he got a little chippy. Like, as I'm reading what he's saying, I'm starting to see him get, like, I can almost picture him in the interview where he's, like, getting irritated as he has to talk about this. So at the end, he says, that said, with the kind of culture of the internet that we have right now, it's impossible to predict what it is that may offend. Certainly, we are not intentionally being insensitive or to offend in any manner. So he's basically saying, you can't, with the internet the way it is now, you can't not offend somebody. It doesn't matter what you do, you come out and there's somebody who's like, oh, you just offended people with freckles. I'm like, what?
Like, called them frecks.
Whatever it is, right? So then again, so he comes out, he responds in what I feel is a pretty respectful way. He's trying to explain himself. Now, one thing you clearly did not hear from me when I quoted that was an apology.
That's true.
He did say, we didn't mean to do that. But he didn't say, hey, I'm sorry if you're offended. He just said, we didn't mean to do that, and we tried very hard not to do that. To me, I'm okay with that. As somebody who basically has to apologize all the time for things that aren't my fault, you sometimes get sick of apologizing for things.
Mm-hmm.
Like just working in customer service in general, people out there who work service know, you apologize all the time for nothing that's yours, things that aren't your fault. And you're always taking responsibility, you're always taking blame. You know me, I always talk about personal responsibility, take responsibility. I do that oftentimes, even for things that aren't my responsibility, I do that. So then, the person who originally wrote the article, Lucina, she said on Twitter, the response from developer Guerrilla Games was along the lines of what she expected, but she was disappointed by the lack of ownership from the studio. And then she said, it's a good example of a situation that could have benefited from additional research or conversation with members of different groups. Do you think they didn't do that?
Well, I mean, we don't know. They probably did to a certain extent.
Well, so here it says, Gonzalez said their team did research offensive and otherwise inappropriate terminology. And pointed to brave in his example of a word they decided to move forward with. Gonzalez said they weren't referring to the culture itself or the people who belong to it as braves, but the adjective associated with a class of warrior, which is true. So in the game, in the game, the braves aren't all the people in the tribe. The braves are what they just call the people that have ascended into being a warrior for the tribe.
It's like a rank.
Yeah, it's a rank, essentially. It's like a group of fighters, like you become a brave when you pass the trial of the test in the game.
Okay.
So, I just... So that also irritates me when someone comes out and explains it, and then the explanation is just not good enough.
Well, and again, it could be that people are reading too much into it, or this author of this article didn't actually play it, but only heard about it, and then therefore made some assumptions. I don't know. Again, I haven't played it. I really can't say one way or another. I think if she feels offended, she has every right to write an article.
Absolutely.
To talk about it.
And she's allowed to feel offended.
No,
I don't want to say that she's in the wrong either. Like, she's allowed to have her emotions come up when certain terminology hits and hit. I have no problem with that. No problem with that at all.
But I think that the response from Guerrilla Games, I mean, could it have included an apology? Sure, like, we're sorry you took it that way.
Right.
Would have probably been all right.
Which is almost like more of a slap in the face sometimes anyway. It's like, well, I'm sorry you got offended. It's not, I'm sorry I offended you. It's, I'm sorry you got offended.
And it's more, you have to be able to wordsmith it in the right way. But, I mean, there could have been a way to phrase it to not put somebody immediately on the defensive. I mean, obviously you want to
Correct.
shy away from using you statements and use I statements instead, or something like that. I mean, there's a way to wordsmith it that would have probably made her feel better. But again, I don't think it was their intention to do any
Correct.
sort of appropriation of the Native American culture. And it seems, just from the screenshots that I've looked at, it seems to take into account other cultures than just the Native American or the indigenous people of America. It does take into the Celtic and the Viking. And
Correct.
it's meant, like we had said before, a devolution and I don't know what the adjective I want to use is, or noun. The devolved, I don't know, you know what I mean? Not going backwards, but just going back to a time where people were more communal as opposed to societal. I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but it's before, the internet, before government. I mean, the government in a very small way existed, but not to the way that we know it today.
It's like hitting the reset button, and then like going back in time a couple hundred years and then seeing what the world was like before we are now. And that's all it's trying to be, is trying to recreate something. We don't know how it was back then. I mean, you can only...
Well, and you have to take into account what was available to people. Animal skins are warm.
Technically, it's what we're still wearing. Just we've gotten a little more refined with it.
Right. Leather is a perfect example. Well, me as a vegetarian, I try not to wear leather or other animal skins just because I don't agree with it. I think it looks much better on the cow.
but something like cotton's okay. Because
cotton's
cotton's sheared and it's actually good for...
Or you mean wool?
Wool, I'm sorry, wool.
Okay, I was like,
wool,
cotton,
cotton's wow. Look at
that cotton sheep running.
Oh, but you're okay. As a vegetarian, you're okay with us just taking cotton right away from its family. Cotton in a field. Wow.
Right when it's sitting down to dinner, just pluck it right off.
I feel stupid. So, wool.
That's why I was like, wait,
wool is wool. Thank you. Wool is sheared off of, a sheep, and then that oftentimes is something that helps the sheep, because if it gets too out of control, it gets really matted and gross and bad. So it's actually better for a sheep to be sheared.
But it has to be done responsibly. I mean, somebody has to know what they're doing and everything. And there's a right way and a cruel way to shear sheep.
So I just had an awakening. I just got offended by people being offended on the internet. So literally everything offends everybody now. Circles come around. Going
back, I didn't mention this before because I don't think it's important to the discussion, but my maternal grandfather, he's my step-grandfather, is actually half Cherokee. And when I was growing up, I remember him telling us, these stories that were essentially tall tales, but they had some truth in it, and about the Native American culture and being a part of the world and a part of nature and being one with the earth and all of that. And I think, again, beautiful, beautiful culture that I wish, they weren't so horrifically slaughtered. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it right now except, encourage people to persist that culture and to not let it be forgotten. I mean, even something as not simple, but something as important as their language is being lost. So they're still trying to continually preserve it and all of that. But I think, again, she has every right to voice her opinion.
Absolutely. I didn't like her response to their response. They were seemingly attacked, so they responded, and then she, was almost like, well, that's what I'd expect. I'm like, well, what do you you expect them to what? I mean, what did she expect them to do? Well, we're gonna patch all those words out of the game. We're gonna spend all this money and all these countless hours after we already spent a bunch of money and countless hours making the game and researching terms that wouldn't be offensive, but let's just take them out because one person wrote an article. I'm done with it. I'm done with this story. It's irritating me.
Oh.
So let's move on to something that's not necessarily happier.
What do you mean?
But we went and saw Logan.
Yes.
on Thursday night. So obviously it's a video game podcast, but whatever. Who cares? We're gonna talk about
We're not gonna
talk about movies occasionally on here.
we're not gonna spoil anything, so don't feel
No
like
spoilers.
you have to. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. I was surprised, but again, I really enjoyed the storyline and how it kind of went down. Everything.
Because okay, so to try to I don't know how to like put this into words without sounding like a total fruit cup. So
What?
like
What does that even mean?
I love Wolverine. He's my favorite character. He's my favorite comic book character. He always has been since I was a little kid. My most favorite toy I had growing up was this little yellow suit Wolverine that had claws that you could push in, they'd spring out, and playing with it.
Snickety snicks.
It's the only toy I've ever bought a second one of because I actually broke his arm off the first one. I played with it so much, his arm broke, the joint to the elbow. So I had a second one, and he's always my favorite. And I've been up and down a lot with this series. Like the first X-Men movie, I liked it because I liked the X-Men and I liked Wolverine. And I thought he did okay. I thought Hugh Jackman was great. And then X-Men 2 was really good. X-Men Origins Wolverine wasn't very good. The Wolverine I didn't particularly very much like either. I thought was okay. No, it's way too fancy for the one I had. I had like a $5 is Toy Biz, I think.
Okay. Sorry.
And no problem. And so like I've been kind of waiting for a movie to do him justice, and this one absolutely did it. It was awesome. It's just a different universe, that's the one. So when Hugh Jackman came out, like whatever it was last year when he came out at Comic-Con, he just came on the stage and said 3 words, Old Man Logan. And that was like to push off that was going to be the next Wolverine movie. Everyone lost their minds because there's a really cool comic book strip called Old Man Logan where it's a post-apocalyptic essentially world where Logan's one of the only superheroes left. And he's trying to live out his life in the desert, because he's like 500 years old, and a couple hundred years old at that point. And basically the story is that the villains all got together one day and wiped out all the heroes. So the villains divided up the world into different like territories.
Yeah, they show a map of like the continental United States in the comic book, and it's California is owned by banners.
It's really neat. I liked it, and it's just Wolverine trying to live with his family, and he lives. The Hulk gang runs that part, so there's basically a bunch of inbred hillbilly Hulks because the only person Hulk could breed with was She-Hulk, I guess. So they just made a bunch of inbred babies.
Yeah, they do look a little inbred.
and so it's your like inbred backwater hillbillies, and so anyway, so then there's just a story of Wolverine gets mixed up in something, and he's got to go from the West Coast to the East Coast. He's got to drive through the whole U.S. and like he has to do something, and I won't spoil it for you because it's a really cool comic. So when we heard Old Man Logan from that, I was like, oh my god, are they gonna try to make a movie out of that? Because that would be crazy. How are they going to get the rights to this character, that character? Well, forget all that. Just take that story, just throw it out. Because what they meant by Old Man Logan was we're just going to have a story where Logan's an old man. And
do you think he knew that? Like, when he said...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he read the script by that point.
No. I mean, do you think that he knew by saying Old Man Logan that people would immediately think it was the comic book?
I think so. I think they were doing that on purpose because, Old Man Logan's one of the better story arcs like that had come out in recent years, and it was a cool thing. And maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he just thought it'd be cool because it was an old man of Logan, and maybe he didn't mean to do that. Who cares?
Nobody.
But in any case, take that comic book and just throw it out because they don't even come close to anything like that. But it's a great story that's essentially taking place in a world that is more realistic, like the movies always tried to do. There's some really cool like one-offs and hits, and it's just great. The movie was more of a drama than it was an action movie. It proves that like a superhero movie doesn't have to be like that typical superhero movie formula of like, and not that I don't like them, but Captain America and Doctor Strange, where there's a big bad and they do all this other stuff and then they beat him at the end. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. You can make a good story based off of characters that are more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really good. And I can't say much more else without spoiling anything.
Well, that's why I liked the first X-Men, because the first X-Men was really about Logan's journey to become an X-Men. He was very resistant to it. It was like, no, thanks, that's not for me. And then ultimately, being put into that role of Wolverine.
Yeah.
And there's some nice parts in there where they kind of allude to the fact that the X-Men were much more than just who they were in the movies. They became almost caricatures of themselves.
Right. There's a neat part. And I don't think this is a spoiler because they showed it in the previews, but like the little girl reads X-Men comics. And so, like, at some point in the universe, someone like licensed the rights to use their likeness to make a comic book adventures of what they did, even though they technically didn't do a lot of those things. You know,
Surprisingly, I read the comic books that are used in the movies were not actual issues.
Oh,
They
really?
were done specifically for the movie.
It doesn't surprise me, like, especially we can't talk about it, but there's reasons, you know. But yeah. So I really liked it. It was a great story, and it was awesome. You know, that movie's kind of the culmination of 20 years of X-Men movies and stuff. It's like 17 years. You know, it was Patrick Stewart said that's his last time playing Xavier. Hugh Jackman said it's his last time playing Logan. So it's just really kind of like, wow. I mean, and I love the X-Men. I love Wolverine, and I've had my ups and downs with it over the last 17 years. But it's sad in a way to see it go, you know, especially since Hugh Jackman's been playing that character for 17 years. That's almost unheard of. And I think it's really cool, and I would love to see if they could do other like movies in the current day that weren't pushed off in the future like Logan is, and maybe he could still be Wolverine, you know, in another movie. Even
You mean
though
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman could be. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't, you know, it all has to do with like say they do an Avengers and X-Men crossover movie or something, or maybe they do another. I mean, I'm just saying they could, you know, and
They could.
he probably won't, but he could.
But he is, holy cow, he looks the part. I mean, he's the perfect Wolverine in my opinion.
And it's funny because the older he gets, the more he looks like Wolverine. Like like when he was younger, in the first X-Men movie, if you watch him now, it's really, he looks kind of stupid.
He looks like a little baby. Well, and I love that movie. That's probably my favorite. Well, I shouldn't say that it's my favorite, but it's one of like my favorite go-to superhero movies.
Okay.
But I hate Anna Paquin.
Yeah.
I don't like her. I don't like her acting. I don't like her in anything she's been in. And I certainly don't like her in this.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of her style either.
And
I don't let her
accents.
I don't let it ruin it for me, but I'm with you. I wouldn't pick her to be first in anything for any actress role
What was
ever.
her superhero ability? She was Rogue, right?
Well, she's Rogue, and so the Rogue that we all know.
Oh, she takes powers, right? Yeah. She's like, I'll take your powers.
So the Rogue we all know, a long time ago had stolen like Miss Marvel's powers. So it was another superhero, and basically she stole her powers, and so she could fly. She had super strength, and she had but she had a lot of her memory. Like that. That's the Rogue we always know. But in the X-Men movie, she hadn't done that yet apparently, so she just sucked, and so literally she sucked powers out of people. But she was just kind of boring.
She was, you know? and again,
and they kind of replaced Jubilee with Rogue. Like they had Rogue be like the Jubilee character of her and Wolverine being like kind of like a father-daughter kind of storyline. They did that with Rogue and Wolverine. I was like, whatever, it's fine. It's fine. It was an okay movie. Not great.
Who's the X-Men that was? He was Russian and he like
Colossus.
Thank you. Because he's in that movie for like literally 2 seconds and he never speaks, so you don't know if he's Russian.
Well, he's in the second movie. I don't think he's in the first one.
Yeah, he like saves the kids from the.
No, that's the second one.
Oh, it is?
When they're in the mansion, and then he's like, and he looks at Wolverine, he goes, "I can help you," and Wolverine just goes, "Help them." I'm like, no, Colossus, you help him. And obviously, Colossus was much better represented in Deadpool, because he's in that.
Oh yeah.
And so they made him like Russian speaking. He's metal most of the time. It was really, that was cool to see Colossus well done there too. Even though he's kind of a dope.
He's a cool X-Men.
Yeah, he's kind of a dope in Deadpool, but it fit the movie. So, but yeah, so it was good. I do recommend everybody go see it. It was really good. It is R-rated, so you know, maybe not take the little ones.
There's a lot of F-bombs in like the first 10 minutes.
A lot of F-bombs, lot of blood and some gore. Which I think was needed for a Wolverine movie, like finally.
Well, and I love that Marvel is doing more adult movies.
And I kind of dig these one-offs personally. Yeah. Like I don't think every movie, like I love what they're doing with the Marvel Universe, how they're building up to the Avengers Infinity Gauntlet and stuff, Infinity War. I think that's great, but it's kind of also cool to have one single movie condensed. Like Deadpool was great for that reason too. Like it doesn't have to be part of a bigger picture all the time. But I like that they're doing the bigger picture with the big movies and then make some small one-shots. Do the Netflix series, that sort of stuff. They're great for that.
Well, and also if you go and see Logan in the theater, you get a great trailer for, well, it's not really a trailer. It's a teaser for Deadpool 2.
Yeah, it was cool. Which I actually found this out. So apparently that was going to be after the credits. That was going to be post-credits.
Really?
Which apparently was why there was conflicting reports if Logan had a post-credit or not.
Okay.
Because I originally heard it did, and then I heard it didn't. Well, it's not really a spoiler. It'll be a pleasant surprise when you see it. But at the beginning of Logan, you see a Deadpool trailer. It's a trailer, is really what it is, but you almost don't know because you
Right.
think the movie's starting, and then it goes into a Deadpool trailer. But it was it wouldn't have fit the tone of the movie to put that at the end of the credits.
That's true.
It was better as a trailer than as an after credit reveal, and I'm glad that they were smart enough to recognize that. They were smart enough to look at this movie and go, "Look, we just got done like hammering at people's emotions for 2.5 hours. Like they don't want to be like, oh, Deadpool made a fart joke, you know?
You get to see a butt.
Chimichanga. Anyway, Logan's great. I highly recommend going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. So, babe, we're already at the hour mark. We literally just hit it.
Holy crap.
So let's talk about our Switch unboxing and our first impressions.
Okay.
In about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll be on our way.
Okay.
So you opened the Switch.
I got to open it.
I let you open the Switch.
And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes.
Yep. And I said, yep.
It's very well packaged. I mean, in terms of just the layout of everything, when you first open it, you get to see the Joy-Con controllers and the actual console, I guess it would be the tablet-y part, you know. Underneath, there's a couple other accoutrements, including the dock. There's the little wrist, the wrist, you jerk. The wrist straps. I'm trying to make a wrist strap motion, and I have my hand in a fist.
Fear for my life. She's going to hit me now.
The wrist straps that go onto the Joy-Con controllers, in addition to what I call it the Wavebird, but
it's the Pro controller.
It's not really.
Yeah.
The resolution is gorgeous.
It looks really good. Like
it looks great.
It's really crisp screen. Like it's really nice looking.
It's very good. I think it's very intuitive in terms of how the controls move. I did have some trouble with the analog sticks being at different locations. The left side is a little higher than the right side. I did have some trouble with remembering where the buttons on the top were, because there's like the A, B, X, Y buttons.
Yeah.
And with it just being kind of in a different location, I would hit the wrong button inadvertently, like if I wanted to drop something versus throw something or whatever.
Yeah, and you're used to the PS4 controller. Right. That's what you've been playing with the most now, PS3 and PS4. So you're used to the analogs being symmetrical,
right,
and right there, as opposed to people who are comfortable with like the Xbox 360 or Xbox One.
Is it like that?
They have raised and lowered sticks. Yeah, so it's up and down. So I actually don't mind either way. It doesn't bother me either way. But
what else? Let me just say one thing. The one thing I was a little disappointed in was the fact that when you undock the Joy-Con controllers and snap them into the Wavebird, whatever it is.
What you're talking about is just the shell. It's a plastic shell that just holds the Joy-Cons to make it look like a real controller.
Right.
So yeah.
For me, it's really comfortable when you snap them into there. But as we noticed, there is no way to charge the Joy-Con controllers while it's in that. You
would essentially have to take it off of like we were playing in TV mode. You'd have to take it off the cradle, plug the Joy-Cons in, and then plug in the Switch to the wall so that you could charge the Joy-Con controllers.
So which
is kind of stupid.
Well, right, and it's not like the PlayStation 4 DualShock controllers where you can charge it while you're playing the console, which I think was a little bit of a miss. But you said they do sell that.
Well, they sell separately like a controller shell that you can plug the Joy-Cons into that does have a charging port in it. Why the hell that's not included in the box makes zero sense to me.
I think that would have been a better choice for Nintendo as opposed to having the one that doesn't plug in. I mean, it just makes sense to allow somebody to charge it while they're playing it on the TV.
Yeah, it does. But what's really funny about that too is like you really liked the Joy-Cons. So when I first held the Joy-Cons, they were smaller than I thought they would be. They are ungodly uncomfortable in my hands. My hands are way too big for the Joy-Cons. So I put them in the cradle or whatever. And it's still too small for me. Like when I'm holding that, the buttons are small, and I don't like how on the left Joy-Con, the buttons are directional because I'm expecting a one-piece D-pad. But
that was a little strange.
Well, and they didn't do that because they want you to be able to use the Joy-Cons as two single-player controllers, right? So I get why they did it. It's just I don't like it. So I bought the Switch Pro controller, and that thing's very comfortable. It's very nice. It fits just like a DualShock 4, except the shoulder buttons are more horn hooks, kind of like an Xbox One controller, and I'm digging it. That controller is what I'm going to use all the time. It's very comfortable.
And for me, that's almost too big. So I've got smaller hands. Well, yeah.
Smaller, like half the size
Yeah,
of my hands.
I mean, my finger, the tops of my fingers come up to his, like, the middle joint of his fingers. So if that gives you any indication how teeny tiny my hands are. I've always had trouble with video game controllers being too large and makes my hand cramp up and everything. So for me, having a smaller, more diminutive, because I love that word, a diminutive size of handheld is really nice. I will say that when the Joy-Con controllers are on the actual console, it feels a little awkward because your hands are so far apart.
Yeah, which I actually, it reminds me of the Wii U gamepad when it's like that, and I actually have experience with that, so it's not so bad. But again, bigger hands, and I'm used to it. For the first time you doing it, you felt it was too big.
Right, but it was mostly, the reason why I said it was too big was because my hands were so far apart.
Yeah.
I didn't think that the screen was too big. I didn't think the Joy-Con controllers were too small. It just felt very unnatural, having played with the DualShock controller and all of that. It just felt really strange that my hands were so far apart. And I mean, even something like the DS XL that I have, my hands are still very close together. So it's just something to get used to.
It was weird having them on like opposite sides of the screen. Yeah.
But the console itself is fairly lightweight. I was able to hold it up relatively comfortably with one hand while I was drinking my coffee.
It's very sleek looking hardware, and I like that there's not, the only thing that's glossy on the controller is the screen. So you're not gonna get gummed up like controllers that you're touching all the time aren't gonna be like getting fingerprints and stuff on them. The only thing on the Switch Pro controller, the very top where you plug in the charge cable, is glossy for some stupid reason.
I think that's more like infrared. Wouldn't that be infrared?
No,
radio frequencies?
I don't think that's how that works.
But what's really cool about the Pro controller is that it's got this smoke translucent shell. So you can actually see a lot of the inner workings when you look at it in light. It's
a really cool looking controller, which down the line they can do different colors of those, and people will buy them. They're really nice controllers. So if the battery life's good on them, what I'm hoping they come out with is some company should make a holder that'll fit on that controller and then hold the Switch.
Oh.
So that way I can have it where I'm playing it and still playing in handheld mode, but playing with a regular controller.
You should get on that and make a patent.
Should I patent that?
Yes.
It's probably already being done. But anyway, I'll buy it when it comes up. But yeah, so I think the system actually, like from a hardware perspective, it's pretty cool. Now there were a lot of reports coming out over the last week from reviewers and early adopters that said that the Joy-Cons are disconnecting frequently. We didn't have any disconnection problems, but we only played it for maybe a half hour. But we didn't see anything, and Nintendo officially responded and said, make sure you keep it away from fish tanks.
Okay.
Lots of wires.
Okay.
And this one really kind of gets me. They said, and cell phones.
Huh.
Because what bothers me is, didn't we just report a couple weeks ago about how Nintendo's voice chat is going to work through an app on a smartphone?
Oh.
But again, I don't know if that's how it's going to be. Also, initially right now, there's friend codes.
Yes.
Again. Friend codes are back, and they're stupid. They're really long, stupid codes.
That's like that. They say, what was it, 7 years ago? Friend codes are dumb. Nintendo thinks about it for 10 years. Nah, friend codes are okay.
Friend codes are okay. That was a great meme.
That's a good one.
So I think there's a little bit of ups and downs, but for the most part, I love new consoles. And I was obviously up and down on this one. I really had high hopes. I wasn't happy with a lot of the stuff I was hearing. I'm still not particularly happy with the launch titles. But I do like where they're going with their indie downloads, and I want to buy Blaster Master Zero's coming out in like a week. I want to play that. That's like a downloadable game. And then obviously Breath of the Wild is going to be a great game. So.
And you tasted one of the...
I did.
You tasted the cartridge
and
for Breath of the Wild.
And like, I don't know how to describe this to people without being like a total, weirdo. So like, obviously there were all those videos like people on YouTube. YouTuber reacts to tasting a Switch cartridge, and then the picture's like him going like, and this is really stupid. Like made for hits rating thing. But because I read all the articles about a bittering agent, I wanted to actually know what a bittering agent tastes like on a piece of plastic. So I licked it, and oh my god, this is bitter. It's awful. Like if you put that in your mouth, you'd spit it out instantly, which is kind of the point.
And then I tried it, and I didn't have any reaction to it. So I don't know if he licked
either I licked it all off,
Or it was because I was drinking coffee that I didn't
And
notice.
you already had a little bit of bitter.
Because coffee already, right, it's very acidic.
Maybe we'll have
bitter.
you lick it again now that
I'm
the
still
coffee
drinking
tastes.
coffee, though.
Dang it. Oh, dang it.
Oh, dang it.
So yeah, I mean, personally, I'm impressed with the Switch hardware.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I will admit too, and I know we've seen this in a million videos, but until you see it in person, it's hard to say. But right away, we had it on the right HDMI channel. Jen plops the Switch into the cradle. It instantly shows up on the TV.
Yeah.
It just was pretty, and it was really smooth and cool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I thought it was neat. I had to make a new Nintendo ID to be able to go online with the Switch, even though I already have a Nintendo ID for my 3DS. But I was able to link the two together, whatever the hell that means.
No, you had the Nintendo ID and then your Nintendo account. Two different things.
Right. So Nintendo account, I had to make a new Nintendo account,
Yes.
which I linked to my Nintendo ID. Sorry, the terminology. I'm confused because there's so much stupid accounts I have to make on the Nintendo system.
Well, it's because I work in that sort of, I used to work in that sort of field where it's like terminology is very important. That's why I ask for clarification a lot of the time. Because people will say one thing and actually mean another.
Something else. That makes sense.
It's like when you say the word, customer, what does that really mean? Like, does that mean people who have bought this one product? Does it mean people that are thinking about buying a product? Is it anybody that bought a product within the last 6 months? There's so many different ways to interpret one word
that word means a lot of different things to me depending on who the customer is.
Ha ha ha. All right.
Anyway, but hey, thanks everyone for listening. As always, that's the podcast for this week. And we, as always, you know what? Oh, I almost forgot. Okay. Someone sent us a message. A question. So it's going to take me a bit to bring this up. I totally forgot about this, but the guy, we only got one and I want to make sure that we get it out there. I can't believe I almost forgot about this. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is from Brian. Okay. So here's his question, Jen. I'll give it to you first.
Okay.
He says, what do you think about strategy guides? It seems like we get bigger games, and these are somewhat needed to figure it all out. So, and then he talks about how he remembers playing Resident Evil on PS1 and couldn't figure out how to beat the snake, and they had to do a bunch of other stuff to try to figure it out. So he's curious about what our thoughts are on strategy guides.
Well, truth time, I've never used a strategy guide, ever.
Ever, okay.
Nope. So I would be not the wrong person to ask, but from my mentality, I think strategy guides can be really useful for people if they want to make sure they get the full experience. It includes things like maps and storyline. I think is a little bit of a spoiler in terms of gameplay, but I'm not saying that I've never looked for help on playing a video game. I have Googled some things, watched YouTube videos of other things, but I've never actually purchased a strategy guide.
Sure. So I love buying strategy guides, but I don't ever use them.
Oh.
It's weird. Like I collect strategy guides almost like it's another piece of the game. So to me, if I really love a game and I want to collect it, I'll get the strategy guide as well. Because I just think that's really neat to have it along with the game. So I don't know if that's years of programming from my GameStop days where we were just constantly selling guides to people. As far as using them, typically how I play a game is I will play all the way through it myself first. And then if I want to 100% the game, I will pop open a strategy guide and go through it and get all the missing pieces, find all the secrets. In something like Dark Souls, I'll typically beat a game, and then I'll start flipping through it, and I'll be like, oh, wow, I missed that. Oh, cool, I didn't know that was there. And then I'll go discover it another time. Mm-hmm. So I think strategy guides are cool, actually. Obviously, the day and age of the internet almost killed them, but now they're doing a bunch of really cool collectible guides, like hardcover books.
Yeah.
The hardcover Zelda ones are really cool. So, yeah, I'm a fan of strategy guides. I think they're neat. I actually don't use them very often, but I think they're cool. And I have, if you see over there, like...
Yeah.
In my game room, obviously, I'm not talking to the people listening. I was talking to Jen about seeing it over here. Clearly, you guys can't see anything. But we have, I have a ton of strategy guides. I've probably got a couple hundred, and I've got all the Metal Gear ones because I collect all Metal Gear stuff, and yeah. So I think strategy guides are pretty cool.
Yeah, neat.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, thanks for the question. And as always, you guys can always ask us questions. You can message us on the Game Talk Radio Facebook page or on the Game Trade Facebook page, and we'll take those either way. You can follow me on Twitter at GameTradeGreg. That's with 2 G's at the end.
Mm-hmm. You can follow me on Twitter at GameTalkJen.
Awesome. Thank you very much, you guys, and you have a great day.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye.